Hello there, friends. Andrew with the Bangs here, and no, I'm not starring in an off-Broadway version of Newsies. I am here to speak with Justin Brierley, the host of The Big Conversation, and The Big Conversation is actually into its 4th season, and the good news is all of the episodes are actually out, and you can check them out here in the description. Justin and I speak about how this season went. We discussed the first episode with Francis Collins and Richard Dawkins. We also actually speak about Jordan Peterson's latest move to the Daily Wire. I was curious to hear Justin's perspective since he had spoken to Peterson before. And actually they're having a course, The Unbelievable Conglomerate, have a course that they are putting out focused around Peterson's discussion on the very first season of Unbelievable. So be sure to check that one out if you haven't watched it. That one is actually 2018 Peterson. We also end up discussing certain themes that Justin has seen in this season and compared to last year. And I pick his brain about where he thinks these sort of cultural trends are going, and he is very gracious and kind, and I really appreciate that he took the time to come on my little podcast, and I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And without further ado, here's Justin. Oh, also remember to subscribe. Thanks. I'm really into vintage, and like Skype is vintage video calling. And it fits.
Absolutely. It's old school.
Yes. But like, it's not even really a joke. That's why it's funny. Because it's true. Okay, so Justin, time is ticking away. So I'm just going to dive in. I mean, that was pretty like cute little intro. I'm going to leave that. We're just going to leave that little Skype joke in there. So,
Go for it.
Okay. But it's been a year. It's been a year like in a month since we last spoke.
Yeah, it has. I can't believe it. Time flies, doesn't it?
Does it feel quick?
I don't know where the time goes. I think as you get older, time goes by more quickly somehow. Because I remember we've just started the school holidays here in the UK, and now my kids are going to have about 6 or 7 weeks off school. But when I was a kid, that seemed to last forever. It just went on and on and on. And it felt like you had kind of passed through several stages of your life by the time the school holidays had finished.
Oh, I'm a different person.
Yeah.
What are they will they recognize me? Yes.
Yeah. Whereas now, because I know exactly what's going to happen in every week of this holiday period, it's like it's all been mapped out, and it's not like when you were a kid. Time just seemed to pass more slowly for some reason. That's my theory.
I mean, I think it's the scheduling. Like if you don't mind going into today, very specific. Today is your interview day. You're giving people slots. I hope you're not talked out, by the way.
No, it's fine. I've only done a couple.
I can fill it up, but I would like you to talk to. But anyways, I bet this day is, I don't know, will it have flown by for you since they're just done, or is it like, slogging through it because it's so many things scheduled?
Yeah.
Is it both at once?
I think it's that old thing, isn't it? Of sometimes time goes slower when you want it to go faster, and fast when you want it to go slow.
I promise you, this will go by so fast because it's going to just be so much fun.
I'm sure it will. The time will fly when I'm talking to Andrea.
You're the British, like, happy fun man for me.
Oh, I'm glad I'm your happy fun man.
You are. You are. You just, but you there's the really like dry British like stereotype, you could say.
Yeah.
But I just feel like you don't live up to it, and I'm glad.
Oh, good. I'm really pleased because I rarely get described as the fun, happy person. I'm generally seen as, I don't know, something else. I'm not nearly as funny as other people I know. So I don't ask me to tell a joke or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's just like you're happy to just smile and be like, yeah, this is lovely, as opposed to like, everything's horrible because
No, I'm not one of those really serious philosophical nihilistic types who kind of just who
has made me have this view? maybe I'm really wrong.
Yeah, you've been watching too much Jordan Peterson. It all gets very serious.
Oh,
and deep.
I want to bring I will be bringing him up later.
Oh,
I hope that's okay.
I thought he might prop up at some point.
I actually did go over what we spoke about last time, because sometimes I look over if I speak with someone, especially if it's sort of in a year increment. It's like, what did we talk about last time? I don't want it to be the same thing if people are like, oh, I watched this one and then I want to go back. Although a lot of the same things are coming up, but it's a year later and things are going to be different in the answer, I'm thinking. But I'm going to set him aside, but we will be coming back.
Okay.
So, Unbelievable season 4. Speaking of time flying, season 4. Like,
season 4 of the big
now.
Conversation. Yeah,
oh, sorry. All right.
That's all right.
Unbelievable. The big conversation.
It's easy to get them confused.
Okay.
I get them confused, Andrea.
You told me about it last time, and I got it wrong again. Sorry.
Yeah, basically, the big conversation is kind of a special season of programs from the Unbelievable show, and it's where we kind of pull out all the stops, we add all the bells and whistles, we kind of do the big shows with the big thinkers.
We'll call it the heart of the whole thing.
It's just a kind of special emphasis on digging into some really big questions with some big thinkers. And so season 4 began around the end of May, and we're just currently in this season, which finishes end of July. And there's been some great conversations. We started off on with 2 big hitters, Richard Dawkins and Francis Collins, in conversation. So I was really pleased to be able to bring them together. And there's just been some really good, interesting conversations. A lot of them actually, it's funny, you don't go into these things necessarily planning a theme, but there's been a definite theme of conversion across at least 3 of the episodes. So that's been quite interesting.
I thought you planned, I actually thought that was...
I'd like to claim that I did, but actually it just... usually what I'm doing when I bring the big conversation together, I'm kind of thinking about guests more than topics. First of all, I'm thinking, okay, who are the people we want to hear from in this season, and then the kind of topics trying to flow out of who I managed to bring together, and the kind of theme of conversion came through in 2 or 3 of these episodes, interestingly. So it's been good.
Okay, so that's one of the things it's kind of like a segue into. The thing I wanted to talk with you about, because the last time we spoke, I was more uncomfortable with the idea of debating, and that was the main reason why I reached out. And then you let me know, I don't even consider it debates that we do here, even though they kind of end up being that sometimes. But we touched on these other things that I will be bringing up. But for now, the main thing I'm wondering is like about the cultural shift from I guess cultural shift of the prominent thinkers. It feels like it's shifting away from the new atheists. I mean, it's already been shifting away from that for a while, and you said that last time. But now,
I was going to say, I mean, it was interesting actually, because in a way, bringing Richard Dawkins on, it was a great conversation, but the substance of the conversation could easily have happened almost exactly word for word 10 years ago, because it was sort of the ideas and the issues being debated, can God account for the fine tuning of the universe? Do we need morality? Where does it come from? That kind of, those issues have been swimming around. I've been sort of discussing and having guests on talking about them since day one of Unbelievable. So, but what's interesting is, it was interesting that Dawkins was willing to come on and talk about it, whereas it's been really, and I think that's partly because the landscape has changed a bit. I think, if I'm honest, maybe he was more in demand in the past because the new atheism was kind of the new kid on the block, and, he was getting, speaking invitations left, right and center. But now I think some of a lot of the support for new atheism has kind of fallen away a bit. The interest maybe has waned somewhat. And I think he's kind of come to see that not all Christians are his enemy as well. I think he and I think that's, interestingly, I think that's got something to do with the fact that part of the reason the new atheism has waned is because it sort of imploded under its own weight. Because I might have mentioned this last time, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself.
I just watched it. So
but there's a kind of sense in which it once they'd decided that they didn't, believe in God, they couldn't agree on anything else, and you've had all of these fallouts, and so it's interesting that Richard Dawkins himself got stripped of his Humanist of the Year award a couple of years ago, and it was because he basically questioned kind of transcendent ideology. He sort of didn't toe the correct line, as it were, in that debate. And so the Humanist Association in America that are giving him this award, summarily stripped it of him. And I think he's kind of come to realize that you can't always have sensible conversations, even on your own side of the fence. And he's actually willing to have a sensible conversation now, wherever he'll find it, and even with a Christian. And so,
dare I say,
because at least they could, even if they disagree on God, they still agree on the basics of having a discussion, that that things are up for debate, that there aren't sort of, ideas that cannot be questioned and that kind of thing. And I think since he's run into that kind of thinking in his own world, in the secular world, I think it maybe has started to make him rethink, what kinds of, that he's willing to sort of cross some of the boundaries he wouldn't have. Because, as I say, I wouldn't have, I wasn't honestly expecting him to say yes to this email. So it was quite interesting when he said yes to this invitation to discuss with Francis Collins. Now, that's not just because of the reasons I mentioned there, but I think he also has a great deal of respect for Francis Collins. And that kind of comes through in some of the conversation they have, particularly around the fact that Collins, who, as I'm sure you and your audience know, is quite a well-known geneticist and,
he respects the field that he's in.
Head of the Human Genome Project, obviously led a lot of the COVID response in the USA as head of the Institutes of Health there. And particularly because of the kindness he showed to Christopher Hitchens during his time battling cancer and so on. And I think that kind of built up a good degree of respect on Dawkins' side. And so that alone, I think, was one of the reasons he was quite happy to come on and have that discussion with Collins.
So isn't that interesting? I'm sorry, like if Dr. Dawkins, I was gonna call him Mr. How dare I? Sorry.
Either professor or doctor. He wouldn't answer to Mr.
Right. So if he was here with the sort of arguments, and I've heard you speak about this with the idea, the rationality, the reason thing has come up with the Paul Kingsnorth talk that you hosted. Should the materialistic scientism version of rationality be affected by respecting the person you're speaking to? And I mean that was what got him there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I'm just sort of noticing these little tendrils of things of the scientism view that Dawkins very much has come to represent. And I don't know if he's like, yay, I love having my name invoked all the time when this stuff is brought up. But I don't know. That was just a thought. But
I mean, it's interesting because even Dawkins, I think, was willing to admit at one point in that conversation that he doesn't necessarily hold to his atheism on purely rational grounds. He said one of the reasons he doesn't like the idea that there's a God behind the universe is because he loves the idea of evolution so much, which is this idea of as a simple kind of law-like process producing complexity. And he says the problem is he doesn't want there to be something complex. He thinks of God as complex. Now, I would disagree with that characterization of God, but that's his view of it. And he says he kind of has a fundamental aesthetic, bias against the idea that there's actually something complex rather than this very simple law of evolution behind the universe. So he was kind of willing to say, it was the idea of God that makes him not want it to be true. And so that was interesting because I think, the problem with scientists often is that we assume, and they assume maybe, that they are purely rational creatures.
Well, they're the God's eye view.
Yeah, exactly. Unaffected by bias, But we all know actually science itself is actually a discipline that, like any discipline, is affected by biases, by, the kind of worldview of the person. And who was the famous Thomas Kuhn, wasn't it, philosopher of science, who wrote that book about the scientific revolutions, and that basically scientists are cling as doggedly as anyone to their particular scientific perspective until the evidence either just becomes overwhelming and they have to have a paradigm shift to a new one, or they simply die out and get replaced by a new generation of scientists, because they're human, and they're not just purely going on the evidence. Things become precious to them. And I think Dawkins in a way exemplified that a bit by saying, actually, no, I've got a particular view on this, and I just don't like God interfering with my sort of love of this particular aspect of science, this evolutionary principle kind of thing. So it was interesting.
Do you think he's sort of changed a little in that sense, that he was willing to go so far to, I don't want to say admit that, because I don't want it to be like a gotcha moment, but to be vulnerable enough to say that.
Yeah, I think in a way he has. I mean, it was a bit of a point of sort of humor along the way in that discussion, because he was sort of saying, he said something like, you could convince me that there might be a kind of deistic God behind things on the basis of this argument. He was talking about the fine tuning. He said, the problem is, if I ever say that, people go around saying that I've been converted.
And he said that, and then you guys, I actually watched your little 2-minute clip about like your season. And you totally did if you could maybe convince me. And he later says that wasn't included. Now everyone's gonna go around saying that I've become a deist.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, we were kind of teasing him because Collins sort of, as soon as he said that, say, you see, he's been converted.
I know. It's like, watch for more.
I mean, I came away actually from the whole thinking, actually, that was really good natured. It was a very sort of
I thought it was
quite
great.
Fun. Mellow. I think Dawkins has just mellowed a bit, in all honesty. He's not quite the fire-breathing atheist.
No. I think some old ages agreed with him, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Professor Dawkins, if you're watching, I'm so as if I don't want to say you're old, but I think that the wisdom might have settled in with the years that have gone. Since the
I think that's
days.
probably true. Yeah.
All right. Definitely. Okay. So I'm very aware of our lack of time, so I'm going to move on.
It's all right. Well, if we come back for a round 2, that's fine by me. Anne.
Okay. Well, that is good. I will keep that in mind. We'll see if we can power through like the bullet points, though. Maybe we can.
Sure.
So okay, So speaking of infighting, it's not fighting, but like how the new atheists sort of ate themselves. I would, and then we brought up, we put Jordan Peterson on a shelf, and I'm going to bring him down. Hello, Dr. Peterson. So he started off this whole thing, the big conversations, right? He was number one.
Yeah, he was the first one.
And you have a book coming out based on that debate he had? Or Unbelievable does?
Well, I've got we've actually just launched an online learning course based on that very first episode. It's our most popular episode ever of Unbelievable, both on podcast and YouTube, because Jordan Peterson is hugely popular. And it was great. I mean, it was relatively short for our show. It was probably only 50 minutes long. But there's loads of great stuff in it. And so we've created a kind of online course on Udemy learning platform where you can basically be guided through it. I'm your guide to sort of looking at the conversation.
And that was
2018. Yeah.
2018, Peterson, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
there's a funny story behind that, though. Okay. Basically he blew up in 2018. Everyone, and it was
Kathy
on the
Newman, I think.
Yeah, the Kathy Newman interview for Channel 4
while
he was here in the UK.
I knew of him before.
Well, absolutely. And he was kind of becoming a cult figure before that interview. But then that interview where they kind of had that set to on the gender pay gap really kind of went viral, and everyone started talking about him, following him. It kind of coincided with the launch of his book. And so there was this perfect storm, and suddenly he was, everyone was talking about him. Well, I actually recorded that big conversation show just a couple of days before he went to have that interview with Kathy Newman.
Oh, right.
So I'd managed to bag this slot with Jordan Peterson and Susan Blackmore.
You're like,
but at
will
that
he
point,
say yes to me now?
Well, that's it. He was kind of a rising star when I
Yeah.
booked him, and got the slot. But he kind of absolutely blew up after that. And I because we weren't due to air this episode till this big conversation season began a few months later, I kind of had to sit on this really hot material I had, and I was seeing everyone talking about Jordan Peterson, and I was like,
and it
"Oh,
worked
it's a
out.
great
It's the
show,
most
but I
watched.
can't release it yet."
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my little Kathy Newman story. Anyway, yeah.
Slow and steady, the right time, and you did. Well, okay, so I don't want to go into the oh, do you think this is good or bad, or like my personal feelings about so Jordan Peterson has recently joined the Daily Wire, the staff of the Daily Wire. Now, if you're brand new and you're coming in to sort of the culture war space, I suppose you could say, you might be like, oh, okay, so that's it makes sense. He's with a larger platform, so he doesn't have to do his own editing. That's what I've seen some people say.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But then if you're others, like me and others, you might be, yeah, I'm not going into personal, I'm just doing hypotheticals, everyone. So you might feel a little like, oh, my pastor just told me he's running for office. For a particular party when I didn't go to church for politics. Politics is, a flash in the pan here. I'm going for ancient wisdom. Well, I mean, if it's church, then I guess the ancient wisdom of God. Through the Bible. And, Peterson's biblical lectures, these things. And I know he's not a pastor. I know that might not be fair. However, it's more that people will be or have had feelings of, what does this mean? And maybe he'll be this exact same person with a little bit of help with the production values. But also it feel, and it's not just him. So that's not fair to only actually point to him. I'm talking about he's just the last, I would say, of the intellectual dark web, the IDW, for those of you who are in the know with the acronym, to sort of, I don't want to say fold. I don't want to make it sound bad. I definitely am. But do you know what I'm getting at here?
I think I know what you mean. Are you kind of worried he's kind of, I don't know, sold out to, I don't know.
I suppose, but it's not just him though. It's the whole group. It's not the staying power that people were looking to them for, to, I suppose, the sort of never meet your heroes, but we're meeting them more because of social media, and so we're meeting them more than people would say in the past. But it doesn't stay. It didn't stay. It didn't have that staying power that, say, a religion has.
The problem is, rather like the new atheism, the intellectual dark web was just a word or a phrase that people put on a bunch of specific thinkers. Now, yes, those thinkers were kind of getting together quite regularly and having conversations, and so it was a useful kind of catch-all phrase for this particular brand of people. But I don't think
but
they
some
ever.
of us wanted it to be a movement.
I get that. I think, I don't know. I mean, if it ever had the signs of becoming a movement, it was always going to become a slightly disparate, just a bunch of different thinkers doing their thing. Maybe, and obviously the kind of star of the show was Jordan Peterson and so on. I don't know. I mean, I think it was what it was. It was an important moment where, we started to hear kind of the pushback against certain forms of political ideology and orthodoxy. And it kind of was a lot of people starting to ask, actually, do we need to reconsider the value of religion? And that kind of thing. I think that's still happening. I think it's just not all going under the label of intellectual dark web. I think there's a lot of different people out there, different thinkers, and I think Jordan. I mean, whether Jordan Peterson continues to have the effect he's had, or whether his influence starts to wane now that he's thrown his lot in with the Daily Wire, who knows? But what I can say is that I've met so many people for whom I think people like Peterson have started to reorient their thinking and so on, and it's kind of solidified a kind of hunch they had that they weren't really getting the full picture from either the kind of progressive left or from the staunch atheist as well, sort of side of the picture. and just it's opened up, I think, a lot more conversation and a lot more willingness to kind of be open to alternative explanations. I think now I think we're seeing a lot more people. I just think that the rationalistic, scientific folk aren't ruling the roost in the way that they used to be, and there's kind of a lot more openness to other interesting perspectives. I mean, one of the people we had on the big conversation this season, a guy called Ian McGilchrist. Now, not as well known as many of the.
He's had a conversation with Peterson like a while back. I remember,
yeah. But very influential actually on that whole crowd. So yeah, absolutely, Jordan Peterson, but many others as well. I mean, he's it's interesting, like, an atheist novelist like Philip Pullman, rates his book, The Master and His Emissary, as one of his most important, influential books, of the last 20 years or something. He's got, and so you've got an atheist like Pullman, praising him to the roof. You've also got the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, who equally thinks he's got some amazing, brilliant ideas. And he's sort of, and he's a kind of, he's one of these polymath type thinkers, and he rejects the reductionistic atheist perspective. So he's very anti the new atheism, but he's a scientist, he's a psychiatrist, but he's got that kind of Jordan Peterson-esque willingness to kind of see things at a bigger level, to put more pieces of the puzzle together, not to reduce everything to a kind of, it all actually boils down to atoms. He's he's a kind of, I think, ultimately an advocate of panpsychism, which I'm seeing a lot of people talking about in terms of consciousness, and wanting to explore the idea that actually consciousness is primary in some way. And all these kind of other ways of thinking about. Now, that doesn't mean they're becoming Christians by any means, but it's kind of like, it feels a bit like, with the waning of new atheism and the rise of IDW, the door's been opened for people to talk about other things, other ways of seeing reality, and even Christian ways of seeing reality. And I think actually Christians have there's been a bit of a renaissance of Christians being invited back into the public debate, the public sphere, for those kinds of conversations, which I think is quite exciting, because it felt like, when the new atheism was at its height, anyone with any ideas that centered around faith or God were sort of sent over to the child's corner. Whereas
very good.
Whereas
You're funny.
Now,
I laughed.
Thank you. That was my attempt at a joke.
That was good.
I mean, no, but seriously, Peter Boghossian in his worst moments, literally said that kind of stuff. He said, it's people of faith need to, leave, go to the kids' corner and leave the adults to talk.
You're like, I wasn't joking. It was actually a quote.
It was like, I was literally picking up on an actual thing. But that's an interesting case in point, because Peter Boghossian, just to give his example, is one of those people who has completely changed his tune on this, because, if you went back to, when was it? He wrote this book, A Manual for Creating
Make Atheists.
That's right. It was this Manual for Creating Atheists. It was very much sort of in the mold of, the God delusion.
Oh.
Yeah, it was kind of basically a kind of, it was like what they called street epistemology, which is like street evangelism for atheists. And he was this Portland sort of, tutor of philosophy, and that was his thing. He was kind of, just very anti-religious, quite dismissive actually. But then I remember when I think this was 2018, I was setting up for hosting a discussion in the US. And this was several years on from when I'd had him first on my show to debate, God and that kind of thing, and the rationality of belief. And I invited him, because I was going to Portland for an onstage thing, to come and be the atheist guest. And he got back to me very politely saying, actually, Justin, I'm going to decline your request, though I do appreciate the invitation, because my views on religion have changed quite significantly in the years since we had that conversation.
Okay.
He said, he basically said words to the effect that he no longer sees Christians as his enemy, and that actually there's a much larger enemy that is our common enemy now. And what he was referring to was what he saw as basically the postmodern trend in academia, where and the rise of all kinds of grievance studies and these kind of progressive ideologies, which he thought which were suppressing academic freedom and which were actually, allowing all kinds of wacky ideas, untested ideas to come into academic life. And so it was only a few months later from that whole story of him and his colleagues who were doing these hoax papers broke.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I've interviewed the other two of them.
James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. So that all came to light. He said, and he hinted at it in this email to me. You'll see why, in due course. And it's interesting because that was a good example of someone who was very much in that new atheist sort of mindset and bandwagon, kind of because of the culture wars, because of what they saw as a much bigger enemy, as it were, than Christianity. Some people who were literally basically on his side of the fence, suppressing truth and so on. That changed the whole conversation. And for me, that's why things have changed, quite a bit from those days when it was just the new atheists versus the theists. And I can't remember how we got onto this, but basically I see that whole thing, of being willing to open up other ideas and so on as part of the outcome of the fact that the lines have all shifted and moved around, and that there's lots of other conversations opening up now.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to pull a Kathy Newman. So what you're saying is, is with the Peterson movement, even if he does change in the Daily Wire, he might not, doesn't matter, because don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Like, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah,
it happened.
I guess
it happened. It did its work. It opened up a lot of other channels that are pushing.
I think what'll be interesting is, in a way, whatever Peterson does next, and whether he's fated or reviled, I think he's influenced so many people that we will see a kind of next generation of people who kind of take that kind of spirit or that whatever spark he gave to kind of go.
We want our messiahs to be consistent. Justin.
We do, don't we? Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
I have an original messiah that I'm going to be going back to. So nothing left. Okay. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I've obviously followed with interest, Peterson's journey, and I think, he obviously went through that big illness and a big crisis on that front. It seems he's come out of that, and he's almost come out of it more bullish than he was before.
Exactly.
And there's a sense in which I think he obviously sees the cultural war that he's involved in as important enough that he's kind of joining forces with the Daily Wire and going to get the message out that way.
And that's the thing.
And I, like you, would be concerned if he lost that kind of more sensitive, engaging,
the ancient wisdom bit.
Yeah, the ancient wisdom, the philosophy, the religion, and just became yet another kind of clanging cymbal in the culture wars. But I don't know. Let's see what happens. Obviously,
you've been very reasonable. Like your points have been very well. They've been very measured because you're good at being that mediator.
I mean, the production values have obviously gone up, but
yes,
the part of the fun with Peterson was that, in a way, it was a bit homemade, and it was a bit kind of, you just felt like you were getting him kind of a bit unfiltered and a bit raw and off the cuff. And I think some of his most moving stuff is when he just delivers things, in that way. Whereas some of these short videos he's done, so he did this message to Christians and message to Muslims.
Yeah, and I was on vacation. I was on holiday.
Okay, well, they
I missed it.
They're a bit more scripted, and they're a bit more kind of, and to be honest, I think they slightly lack something because they don't have that sort of more impromptu feel to them.
Cuff.
And
yes.
But anyway, we'll see. It's early days.
Thank you for giving me your personal opinion. I feel like you're like, she wasn't gonna ask for the personal opinion, but I'll just. She's hinting at it. And oh my goodness, I'm sorry, your cup? What is that?
This is one of my children's cups. This is a Lego.
I have one of those. Like I have the Emmett one. You have the Vitruvius one.
They did a load of these at McDonald's. Sorry for
Yes,
product
and
placement.
we kept it because it's still good.
Yeah, we've
It's the
got quite a few
hologram
of
one.
these. It's the
Yes.
hologram one.
I
These were the
only have
best
one.
things you got with a Happy Meal.
No, they
Nowadays,
were. I'm using it today still. It's
yeah,
my
these
the
are really
large
good,
extra
robust
cup.
cups, and we have several of them in our cupboard.
Well, I'm jealous that you have more than one.
So I have this Vitruvius one, who's some character from the Lego movie.
Some character, Morgan Freeman.
Okay, I'm obviously not as much of a fan as you.
No, my
Lego
boys have been like really obsessed with it and playing the Lego game of the Lego movie.
Yeah,
and I also just like it. So.
Yeah,
actually, Vitruvius was really an actual like a Roman, I believe, or maybe Greek.
Yeah.
He was an actual architect.
Yeah,
master
that
builder.
makes sense. And the guy in the Lego thing does look quite like he's doing some ancient pagan thing. That looks about right.
And we have
there you go.
in there too, and Dumbledore, who he was based on. So.
I bump into parents all over the country with these in their cupboards.
Really?
They're
Look
really
at
good cups.
Commonalities. Rise up. Thanks, McDonald's. Capitalism. Actually, that reminds me. So moving on, I'm gonna go to the. Oh no, you're not the right phone. I'm gonna go over to. There's a YouTube. So I actually asked, sort of in prep, kind of my own thing I've been thinking about, kind of in prep for this. I asked Twitter if they thought spirituality is becoming something that more people are open to in the West in the past 20 years. I was thinking 10, but I thought I'd say 20 because I'm older than I always remember. So maybe I should say 20 years. But you you touched a little bit about or on this in the interview with Ian McGilchrist. No, I didn't watch that one. It's the Paul Kingsnorth one. And,
yes, Paul Kingsnorth. Yeah.
And who was it with? Was it the
So that was with Rowan Williams.
Bishop of
former Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. So I don't know if you brought it up or which of them brought it up. Something about the crisis of spirituality in the West or the crisis.
Yeah. Meaning and.
So here's this answer from a fellow Discord Bridges of Meaning member. I want to plug the people. I want to give them the I don't want to. Oh, some person from Twitter. You want to give them. You gotta
absolutely.
name them. So this is from Nate Heil, and this is a perfect encapsulation of what I wanted to ask, but now I don't have to word it. So he says about the spirituality. Is it more of a thing nowadays over the past 20 years? So he said, yes, people want spirituality, but they want it as a consumer chasing self-fulfillment. They don't want a nasty religion that might interfere with life of comfortable consumption. There are also those who are looking for something more, which is why old religions are surging. That to me, that was like a perfect there's this problem and then there's this solution they're both there. And I actually got answers of yes, spirituality is surging, and no, it's not. I got a mix of both where he had the best answer. That was a bit of yes and no. So what do you think of that? And based on the conversations you're having and the feedback you're getting in these questionnaires that you're putting out?
I would say that's pretty much there. I think that's a very good summary of what's happening at the moment. And actually, the episode that I don't know when this conversation will be released, but our final episode of the big conversation is one with Michaela Peterson, the daughter of Jordan, of course, and John McCrae, who runs the What Do You Meme YouTube channel. And we very specifically were asking questions about millennials and Gen Z and their search for spirituality. Now, Michaela Peterson, interestingly, has come to faith in the last year or so. And it's interesting. So it was interesting to ask those questions of her and the audience then about what they think of this search for spirituality as well. And I got that sense very much that, I think, it's hard to avoid the statistic that the rise of the nuns is happening, those who say they have no religious affiliation. So people, I think, are less interested in organized religion. You can see that in the way that traditional church going, continues to be on a downward trajectory in in Europe as well as in the US. But having said that, when you look at the same polls, people aren't they're not ticking atheist either. It's only gone up like 1% in like 25 years or something, the number of people who actually identify specifically as atheist. So it's a kind of agnostic / spiritual but not religious sort of feel that a lot of people seem to be into. And it is a very kind of consumeristic one, I think, because it is very much about pick your own kind of practices, and I'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'll pray, and it's, the question is that just the way it's going, or is it just a symptom of the fact we live in this very, I guess, consumeristic culture? And so now everything gets commodified. So the churches that do the best are actually the ones who package it the most like a commodity. Ironically, it is the mega churches, where they can put on a really kind of the big show, and they can kind of put on, put everything kind of basically in a way where you can just choose your perfect combination of things. Whereas churches that are more kind of real are the ones where you have to do quite a bit of the work. You have to get involved. You have to be, you have to sit next to people who annoy you, and you have to, listen. Sometimes
participate in the liturgy. Like if it's it's one of these more ancient ones that people are joining to.
Exactly. So I think it's interesting because, the trend has been for people to just kind of have this commodified spirituality, delivered these days often via an app or something like that, where you can get your yogic meditation on demand and that kind of thing, but you don't have to be committed to any kind of religious community for that. It's something that you can just kind of do in your own private way. So it's this commodification, privatization, individualistic kind of therapeutic moral deism, or whatever you want to call it. But I think I guess I do wonder if that is wearing thin, because evidently it's not stopping the meaning crisis still being a full-blown thing. And to some extent, I wonder if it's only when people rediscover the value of community and living in, yes, the strictures of what that means, because you do have to limit yourself, and you do have to, it is a place where you have to do more self-sacrifice, and you have to bump along with other people who are not like you. But I think gradually people might be coming to realize that actually, as Christianity has always said, that is the way of freedom. That is the way in which you actually find true freedom, is by actually doing this path of self-denial and servanthood. And so who knows, maybe the pendulum will swing back, because people realize that this kind of personal self-help kind of spirituality is actually just reinforcing the problem, which is that we're constantly focused on ourselves. And again,
how will we see that? How will?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because even some of the best thinkers of our time, the Jordan Petersons, who are pointing people back towards Christianity in some way, they still don't get it all the time, because I think the danger is even they are still kind of treating Christianity as a kind of means to an end. Basically, this is the way to get your life back on track. This is the way to get culture back on track. It's a useful fiction, or whatever the thing is. And the problem with that, of course, is that that then puts the individual first and foremost, whereas it's actually got to be Jesus. It's got to be Christ who is the thing, the goal, the prize. It isn't actually our well-being, our mental flourishing, our cultural renewal. That if that happens, it'll be an after thing. It'll be an after effect. It'll be the fruit, the reward. But the goal, has got to be Jesus. And for me, that's what's often lacking in those even some of these IDW type thinkers who are thinking about religion. So for me, I'm I guess I'm an old-fashioned revivalist, really. We've got to get Jesus back at the center.
Get some songs by the Wesleys, or
Well, they led a pretty good revival back in the day.
There were a lot of really great British revivalists, actually.
Yeah. I mean, when you look back at it, religion in the West has always gone in a series of cycles, and there's I think that you've always had these peaks and troughs where the revival of one generation has turned into a sort of dull nominalism a couple of generations later, and then someone else has come along and suddenly the spirit breaks in and you've got a new revival. Now I'm not a good prophet, but who knows, maybe we're in the sort of the foothills of the next great revival, that, people are going to, ultimately find that materialism, individualism, it doesn't satisfy, and that the atheist didn't have the answer, scientism didn't have the answer, even Jordan Peterson maybe didn't have the answer, but that actually there is an answer, and maybe the church is sort of being shaped and molded at this point to kind of start to be the receptacle where we can offer that again to people. So yeah, who knows what the future may hold.
The receptacle. You put it in such a beautiful term. I mean,
I was inspired by this receptacle.
You're right.
That was what it was.
No, but I get the image of like, you want to come build a barn, you want to come build something true, like because it's a hard. And you're right about it's hard work. It is not easy, but it is freeing.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
it's one of those things where the church, I think, has always been tempted, understandably, to kind of just try to meet the culture where it's at by looking like the culture and providing the right music and the right feel and, basically matching the same cultural assumptions. But again, in some of these conversations, it's been interesting, for some of these adults who are coming to faith, like Paul Kingsnorth, people like Tom Holland and others.
Wait. What? Tom Holland?
Yeah, no, I mean, Tom Holland is basically
he holds back. He okay, I've listened to like every episode of The Rest is History. And he always maintains that he's not.
Well,
do you know something I don't know, Justin?
I mean, well, I think I don't think it's a particular secret that Tom Holland is a regular churchgoer now, and that he, he's spoken in some platforms.
Maybe I didn't hear him talk about the church. I hear him talk about Love Island.
You're right. I mean, he doesn't wear it on his sleeve, put it that way. But
except that Dominic always goes on about like, oh, your favorite Christianity. But there's a sort of like a hovering above, or hovering to the side that it always felt like. But
I get the sense that with Tom, he doesn't want to be pigeonholed, put it that way.
Yes.
But I think, and I think there are still intellectual questions, but then there are for everyone. There are for me, for anyone.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sorry for like.
I think he sees it as the most
on that, but I just couldn't help it.
I don't know. I think he just sees Christianity as the most beautiful story. If you're going to believe a story, believe the most beautiful story that's there. And as he put it to me in an interview I did with him, he said, at the end of the day, he said words to the effect, whether you're a Christian or a humanist, you have to believe in a miracle, basically. Humanists just believe in the miracle of human rights, but that's just as much a faith position as believing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and rose from the dead. And he said, so, why not just believe it? And I think he would say there are some days when he doesn't feel like he really believes it, and there are other days when he really feels like he does believe it. And so to that extent, but I can't speak for Tom. You'd have to talk.
And I will say, thanks to your connection, we're still in the planning stages.
Oh, good.
But because he's writing his book and he's finishing it up. It's been since last November. But that's what happens. You got to be patient when you're a podcast host. But I'm supposed to chat with him at the end of August, early September. So I will be talking directly to him.
When I look at people like Tom Holland and Paul Kingsnorth, they've gone back to a very sort of ancient form of, Christianity. Yeah. So Paul Kingsnorth, the Eastern Orthodox Church. Tom Holland attends the oldest church in London, and he loves that ancient Anglo-Catholic liturgical kind of style. And I think, and what I've heard from them and others is, we don't, if we're going to come back to faith, we want church to look different. It has to connect us to that stream back there. If it looks too much like just everything that's happening right now, it immediately loses its appeal, because it just feels like
down the street.
Yeah. And I get that. And And I think there's a lesson for the church there about not sort of simply pandering to whatever the current, cultural fashions are, and sort of, as Douglas Murray puts it, keep Christianity weird. It's kind of, that's its attraction, that's its power, is when you're upfront about the weird stuff, about the weird claims, because that's kind of the magic of Christianity, and if you strip that out, it just becomes another social club, it just becomes another good cause.
Right.
And yeah, so I think there's something for the church to learn there about how to present itself and to not basically try to hide what it actually is,
Mm-hmm. Do you, and I don't actually know if this is like if you'll release this as like publicly, like you say that you have these surveys that you put out at the end of these the big conversations. So what have you learned from, if you don't mind sharing it?
I mean, those surveys are partly
response?
those surveys are partly just for us to kind of gauge how the shows are engaging people and how people are interacting, but they also do help to give a sense of the audience who are coming to watch, the balance of Christians and non-Christians who are engaging with the shows, and to what extent they find those kinds of conversations helpful. And yeah, I mean, by and large, the results seem to show that actually people are really enjoying the kinds of conversations where they don't necessarily land in one side being right or wrong, but where there's a real sense that you get a better perspective on how the other side thinks about something. And so it's less about sort of an individual winning, one of these conversations. And frankly, most of the conversations that we do aren't really set up in that way.
No.
But it is.
What do they think? Like, what do they think of how it's being said?
Yeah. And the whole point of the big conversation really is about not necessarily changing someone's mind, but just that they become more open to understanding at least someone else's perspective. And that, I think, is a big value of having these kinds of conversations. There's very rarely an edition of Unbelievable which totally changes the other person's mind, or a viewer or listener's mind. But I think in the long run of being exposed to those conversations, it helps you to develop your own critical thinking. It helps you to kind of put more of the pieces together for how you being open to a perspective. So I would hope that a dyed-in-the-wool materialist atheist, if they spent time listening to Unbelievable shows over a good amount of time, would come away at least with a bigger picture of actually what reality might look like, even if they haven't been converted. Likewise, if a fundamentalist Christian starts listening to Unbelievable, I'd hope that they too would sort of be shown that there are different ways of understanding God and spirituality and Christ than perhaps just the narrow version that they've been introduced to. And even, possibly understanding and getting on better with atheists in the process, because you understand sort of some of the issues and problems that they have with Christianity. So yeah, that's kind of the purpose of those surveys, is just to see whether people are, I guess, whether it's opening up minds to kind of, see a different perspective a bit more.
Do you know the breakdown? Like, is it like 50-50, like Christians, non?
No, it's still, I mean, the audience,
Christian-y?
well, it's still a pretty Christian audience. So I'd say it's anywhere between, I don't know, 70 or 80% probably Christians who are watching or listening. Saying that could be slightly skewed by the people who choose to take part in the survey, right. Who knows? But certainly of the people who respond, it's sort of that kind of level. So and which is fine, because I think in many ways, the I try to obviously make the shows as far as possible appealing to both Christians and non-Christians, but I think very often it is Christians who are most invested on seeing these kind of cultural ideas debated and examined. The atheists and agnostics who are involved in the discussion are kind of coming in more tangentially sometimes, I think, and they're more kind of I suppose interested in religion, but they don't see it as a sort of the thing that's going to solve society, as it were. They just see it as one among a number of issues that need to be sort of put in the picture. But so that's kind of what the breakdown is of the show.
Well, so I probably should have said this in regards to the Richard Dawkins stuff at the beginning, but just we were focusing more on what was changing on that side, on his side of things, the atheist side.
Yeah.
But I would say even on the Christian side of things have changed, because it used to be debates with like young Earth, old Earth, like sort of spaces.
Yeah.
We were atheists, or of course like the evolutionary Big Bang thing, and then the Christian or the new Earth, 6,000 year. I don't know.
Yeah, the young Earth thing.
But that's not a thing really. I should not speak as if I know, but it's not as put forth in the way it was.
Yeah, I think it's I think
like
those debates I think the debates have died down a bit on that front. I don't know whether it's, I mean, there are still corners of the internet where these things get hotly debated, but yeah, partly New Atheism was a response to young Earth creationism, and I think because it was sort of, I think it was because there were concerns, especially sort of in the mid 2000s, that creationism was going to sort of start being taught in classrooms. There was the whole Dover Kitzmiller trial about intelligent design and so on. That sort of lent a lot of fuel to the New Atheist stuff. I think since a lot of that has died down, and other cultural battles have kind of taken their place, to do with identity and gender, race,
there's
and so
always
on.
Something in the vacuum of
it's like that.
Talk about
those debates and arguments, at least in the general, at least in the popular culture, have been replaced by other debates and arguments.
Of course, there's always going to be a debate and an argument. It depends on which, but
so yeah, I guess these things are just seasonal, aren't they? And and it's not that those issues have gone away, and there's still a significant issue that lots of Christians need to think through, because one of the most frequent things I do find with Unbelievable is either Christians who are going through a bit of a deconstruction crisis because they've been fed a very particular version of Christianity that maybe includes some of those things, and they're trying to work out how to
years ago.
Okay, yeah, and they're trying to work out how to reframe their Christianity now without some of these things, that maybe they were taught were somehow critical to Christianity. Equally, I find ex-Christians who have left the faith altogether, for whom this was a big issue. But I also find people who are coming back in
because they're not an issue anymore.
Yeah, because they've realised that it got overblown. That actually the Christian church is a heck of a lot bigger than their little instantiation of it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I have like 5 minutes left with you. Okay, so where is the future for season 5? Say for the future of the big conversation. I didn't say Unbelievable. Yay, it's stuck.
No. It's
will you
an
be
open
planning
book.
A theme?
Yeah. I mean, I will do what the Spirit leads me to do. And
do you plan? Like, do you just wait? Do you go from season to season, or do you get ideas and sort of hope like
there's always conversations going on? You just said you're sort of you're having a long form conversation trying to get book in a guest, and it's the same with us. There were people who we nearly landed for this season who we couldn't do in the end, so we're going to see if we can put them in for the next season. There's always and to some extent it's about sort of taking the cultural temperature and seeing what the issues are that we think people will be most interested in hearing debated, because things do move on. The issues that we were debating 10 years ago, 15 years ago at the show, they're different issues now. They were of their time, and they were important, but people, I don't think, for instance, people are so interested in just those classic does God exist debates any longer. I think that whole conversation, as we've been talking about, has moved on much more onto the kind of how are we going to now live meaning type debates. We've done more in the last couple of seasons on AI and technology, because that's a big sort of increasing issue in culture at the moment. So it's sort of finding what maybe Elon Musk will do something crazy, and we'll that'll be our, define our next season or something. So yeah, I'm always open to suggestions though. So if anyone's watching or listening to this and wants to put in a suggestion, do feel free to get in touch.
Yes. Okay. Well, also, I would like to put in a suggestion regarding this whole consumerism spirituality thing. I think that would be really interesting to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah.
Not
Would be.
necessarily even a debate, but like a couple people's perspectives
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
that one.
definitely. Yeah, there's some good people out there who could talk about that. So
Okay, well, I will know that I'm part of the catalyst for that one, as if I am, and you don't have your own thoughts about it. I'm sure I'm not the first to bring it up, but
I'm going to give you a credit. All
oh,
ideas were inspired
yes,
by Andrea with the bangs.
yes, that was
Okay.
my goal for this whole.
Yeah.
This is the whole reason why I wanted to talk. It's like maybe he'll talk about me next time something is happening on his show. Well, speaking of, when is the next something
The, the next
conversation
something.
coming out?
Yeah. So again, so we've had five episodes of this series of the Big Conversation, and episode 6 drops on the 29th of July. That's the Michaela Peterson and John McRae discussion on millennials and Gen Z. But you can watch them all at your heart's content,
Yes,
over at the
YouTube.
bigconversation.show. That's the place to go.
Okay, I'm like, YouTube, right? Oh no, yes, you have an actual website, which I will put in the details. Okay,
Awesome.
I think that, we did it.
Cool.
Yes, okay, this is, we did all the bullet points, we got through it.
Amazing.
I think you're going to be on time for your next chat. You're going into the night. It's like nighttime for you. Good
That's
job.
all right. I'm a night bird. I'll be fine. But
Okay.
it's been very nice to chat with you again,
Well,
Andrea.
thank you for giving
you.
me this time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Justin.
Well.
Okay, well, next time, like next year.
Yeah,
We'll
absolutely. Let's
chat.
do it again.
Okay.
God bless.
Bye. If you would subscribe, that would be the bee's knees.